Well, folks, this is your History Committee here in Brisbane, Australia on the river, looking for Don Wunsch. So they tell me this is down under, so I thought, well, maybe I should hold the camera upside down. Oh, wait a minute. Now it works, right? We'll find Don shortly, and we'll interview him for you.
You're on.
Red dot's on?
You're on.
It's on the screen. Okay.
All right.
You're on, boys.
So, how you doing, Don? This is your History Committee, having an interview with Don Wunsch. And, usually, folks, I'm Jim Keller. I'm the interviewer. Normally, I'm on the other side of the camera, and so I'm going to have to change my hat.
Tip it up.
Right there.
This shit, no.
And so, all right.
Oh, well, I can't compete with that hat. I'm just going to...
Okay. All right.
What's your pirate name?
My pirate name is Red Sam Rackham.
My pirate name is Green Moon.
Green Moon.
And at the camera, we've got Mad Sam.
All right. So, this is Don Wunsch, distinguished professor at Missouri University of Science and Technology. Don, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself to get started?
Sure. My formal education started with the Jesuit Corps Honors Program at Seattle University, which I completed, the 2-year Jesuit Corps. Missed Albuquerque, got back there for my bachelor's in applied mathematics. Missed Seattle, got back up there for my master's in applied mathematics at the University of Washington. And then switched to EE because that's where the neural network guys were. And got my PhD in electrical engineering at the University of Washington. My advisor was Bob Marks.
So your entry into the CI community came at your PhD level?
No.
Okay.
Well,
why don't you tell us about that?
My entry into the CI community came because of Boeing. So I was working in electromagnetic pulse, which was an area where my dad has an international reputation, and that was my foot in the door into Boeing, but I didn't want to stay in that field. And a year later, I had the opportunity to join a group that was the intersection between optical computing and artificial intelligence. That was my assignment, to find the intersection between optical computing and artificial intelligence. And one day, my lead engineer walked in from a conference about a week on the job, said, "Don, you should look at this paper by Dimitri Saltis and Bill Farhat called Optical Implementation of the Hopfield Model." I took a look at that and I realized right then that my life had changed. And that was in the fall of 1985, and I've been working on neural networks ever since. So that was 2 years before I finished my master's.
Wow.
Almost 2 years before I finished my master's.
But Don is one of the old timers.
Yes. And so I got into neural networks in a big way right then, and I started reading these papers by Hopfield, and I started realizing that I thought the Volterra-Lotka predator-prey models were more appropriate than the models that he was writing. And one of my Boeing buddies was a Usenet junkie. He was reading all these news groups. He would have been an internet surfer these days. And I told him that, and he said, "Well, don't you know that Steve Grossberg has been doing this since the 60s? And so I started looking at that work, and it clicked. And so that helped me a lot too.
So Don, since you've been in this for a long time, can you say anything about the challenges that you had in getting people to adopt these technologies into real problems?
It was tremendous, particularly in industry. So when I was at Boeing, I had to fight to work on neural networks, even though I had been given the full-time assignment to look at the intersection between optical computing and artificial intelligence. And neural networks was a no-brainer for that. But even though I'd been given that full-time assignment, I had to fight to keep that as being the role, because there was a lot of skepticism about neural nets. And in fact, more recently, it was music to my ears to be visiting Boeing, and people were talking about a big multi-billion-dollar project, and I overheard somebody say, "Who's your neural net guy on that project?" So that was a sea change from the way things were when I was a young neural network.
So now if we kind of focus then a little bit on the your involvement with the CIS community, which of course also involves, in your particular case, the INNS.
Mm-hmm.
Would you elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, Bob, I think, saw early on that I may have a role for getting involved in some of these functions involving other people working in the field, and so he was telling me a lot about the things that were going on at the time. So I was his grad student by this time. I became his grad student in about '87 or so, and he started talking to me about all the things that were developing and happening, and wanting to create a neural network council that would eventually become a society, and about the importance of pulling the right people in, and so he asked me to become the local arrangements chair for the International Joint Conference on Neural Networks in '91 in Seattle. But he included me in all of these discussions about collaborations with the INNS, that type of thing. By that time, I was already good friends with Bernie Woodrow and Steve Grossberg, Dale Carpenter, and so I knew a lot of people on the INNS side of things and on the IEEE side of things, and so this was how I got involved in that type of thing. And soon after IJCNN in '91, or right around that time, that's when I finished my PhD, and Bob suggested that I get on the IEEE Neural Network Council. So I accepted that and served on that for a while.
What do you see as your main contribution, the contribution that you take most satisfaction from?
Well, I really felt very excited about my contribution in my dissertation research. I woke up at 3 a.m. with this idea of optical implementation of adaptive resonance, and that turned out to be the first hardware implementation of adaptive resonance. But there's been other work since then that I'm excited about. Work with Prokhorov on reinforcement learning, or Mulder on traveling salesman problem. But I think that the most recent work, you ask anybody what they're excited about, and I think that's what they're working on now. So most recently we've done some work on hierarchical bi-clustering, which is also known as co-clustering, which is also known as subspace clustering. So our hierarchical bi-clustering work is really exciting because it runs in linear time. It generates superior results to the other bi-clustering algorithms where published benchmarks are available, and so I'm really excited about that, and it also lends itself to parallel implementation. So I'm really excited about the most recent result, where you got a hierarchical cluster, but it's a bi-cluster, and within the bi-cluster you're doing it again and again and again. So I think that's an area that I'm very excited about.
This is my first time as being the interviewer, so of course I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit more. So we always ask in these interviews about the impact with the society. So on one hand, what do you feel is your major impact to the society? And then what is it that you believe, how did you believe the society has impacted your life?
Well, I'll take the second one first. I've been profoundly influenced by the people that I've met in the Computational Intelligence Society and the International Neural Network Society. So I've mentioned the names of Bob Marks. I've interviewed Tom Caudell, who was like having a second advisor. Steve and Gail had a profound influence. It was like strapping rockets onto my career. But before any of them, people like Bernie Woodrow and Robert Heck Nielsen were some people that I met within my first year of working in the field, and they've had a tremendous influence on Bob, if any of you have met him, has this ebullient enthusiasm that's very contagious. And,
As does his student.
right, and so that really did a remarkable thing for me. Bernie Widrow has a very finely tuned and active BS detector, and he taught me to have a very strong sense of engineering skepticism, and so that as well has been very important to me. But throughout the course of the time that I've been involved, all of the people that I've met, and particularly the people who blazed the trail before me, guys like you two, Feller and Bezdek, became great friends. I met Bez a little bit earlier when we both worked at Boeing. The thing that I think is so exciting about working in this area, it's like being a physicist during the Manhattan Project. You have all these. Isaac Newton said, "If I've seen far, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants." But he didn't have the luxury of living at the same time of all of these giants. So I number you guys among my friends, Lotfi Zada, Steve Grossberg. I have to mention Paul Werbos because he's had an absolutely pivotal transformational effect on my career, both intellectually and through the funding that he so wisely administers. But these people are going to be remembered a millennium from now, and that's why I'm involved in the history committee, because that's unique to this field. You can't interview most of the great physicists, but you can interview most of the great pioneers in computational intelligence. So a lot of them are still with us. We lost a couple in the last year. We lost Huxley just a couple of weeks ago, and we lost John Taylor earlier this year. But we still have these treasures with us, and we have the opportunity to record that for posterity. So I really believe that in the year 3000, in the year 3012, people will be looking back at these videos and
well, let's hope so. Well put, Don. Since this is talking about the history of the society, there has been a hiatus in the connection between the INNS and the CIS, and I think it would be good if, just to say something about that.
Like a good interviewer, you're not letting me wiggle out of the second question.
That's right.
So you asked about the role that I've been able to play, and so I brought the people together at the time of the breakup. The breakup was the result of an arranged date that I set up. So in IJCNN 91 Seattle, one great thing about working for a big company is that with a phone call you can do a lot. And so I made a phone call to the PR people, and they set up Boeing plant tours, and they gave us 800 plant tours plus buses from the convention center to the Everett plant. And they had a vice president who was assigned to give VIP tours, and I could give a subset of about a couple of dozen VIP tours. And I put Bob Marks, who was then president of the IEEE Neural Network Council, on the same VIP tour with Paul Werbos, who was the president of the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society. But back then it was Paul was the president of the International Neural Network Society, and Bob was the president of the Neural Network Council. And I put them on the same tour. Now, I knew that Bob had been telling me this arrangement with INNS just isn't working. There were a lot of things that IEEE saw differently than INNS saw. And he was far from alone. He was just telling me what he was hearing in the board. So it wasn't Bob decided that this relationship would break down. But he had been to enough, and this was before I was on the board, he'd been to enough of these board meetings to realize that the sentiment on the board was very strong on separating out IJCNN and going back having ICNN. And that would mean, and we knew it would mean, that the INNS would have its own conference, and these would wind up competing. And Bob found it convenient to break the news to Paul during that plant tour at Boeing. And I wasn't there, but I put Tom Caudell on that same batch. I went on the batch with Grossberg. So Tom came back and told me that was an exciting group that you put together, and the breakup was announced at that point, and it was not without its stresses. I think that Bob and Paul, to their credit, have both come back together in an admirable way, and they think the world of each other now, and that's something that I really admire about both of these men. But I joined the Neural Network Council soon after, and what happened was obvious to everybody was that these two societies running separate meetings was cutting both of them in half, and either meeting being half of what it could be was not a good thing. And so the sentiment came to work out the problems that happened before, to learn from the things that each side didn't like about the way that others did business. And so both societies came together and negotiated a deal with a memorandum of understanding. And this was going on during the time that I was on the board of the IEEE Neural Networks Council. About the time that got ironed out was when around the time that I became an assistant professor and working on tenure, and the service end of things I had more than they ever would ask me to have. So I decided to step back from that a while and concentrate on my research. But
can you tell the folks what year that was?
Well, I stepped off of the council around 94, 95, and the memorandum was
96.
It was being negotiated. I remember that Bez started the tradition of exchanging ties with. So Bez and Walter, I think, were the first to exchange ties.
No, actually, Dan LeBlanc was the guy who got the tie.
Oh, right.
Walter was the guy who
signed it with you.
Yeah, he and I were the people who negotiated the agreement.
Whoa, the cameraman is talking.
Yeah,
we do.
Third law, come around, break the third law. Here comes Mad Sam. All right, I guess.
I am the cameraman. Just to finish the story about the remarriage of the two societies, Walter, and not Walter Freeman, was the president of the INNS when I was the president of the NNC, and we negotiated the MOU with committees, of course, on each side. But by the time it was signed and sealed and delivered, Walter turned over the INNS to Dan Levine. So the tie of friendship started in Houston in 1996. And I believe it still exists today, does it not?
Yes.
Yes, the MOU is still being followed. By the way, that points up another thing. At the time, as implied by what you just said, the IEEE presidency, society presidency, or council presidency, now society presidency, was 2 years. INNS was 1 year. And a number of years later, after I'd been out of my IEEE duties for several years, I got asked first to run the conference and then to run for the board of INNS. And a few years after that, I became INNS president, and one of the first things that I did was to together with the whole board, of course, to change the bylaws to set up a 2-year term for the INNS president. And we did a lot of changes to the structure of the INNS under my presidency. That was the year 2005.
And the marriage is still happy to this day.
The marriage is going quite well to this day, and both societies realize that the other one brings value to the equation. And I think that's one lesson that we had to learn the hard way. I think that sometimes you appreciate your spouse most after you've been apart for a few weeks.
Okay, Don, that's excellent. So to kind of sort of cruise into the swan song here, what do you have any thoughts about the future of computational intelligence?
Yes. So I said some things in the history panel yesterday that I thought that neural networks had met all the objections of its harshest critics, but had not yet met its aspirations of those that wanted to see this emergent collective computational capability in non-by-anointment hardware. And I think that the new memory technologies that are coming out create an opportunity, an incredible opportunity for widespread embedded applications of neural networks. And so you hear a lot about memristors, but I think it doesn't even matter which memory technology that we're talking about. Non-volatile memory technology is on the future, and that's a technology that lends itself very well to hardware implementation of neural networks. On the algorithmic side, I think that more can still be done to bring together the techniques of error-based learning with match-based learning. So the work of adaptive resonance, for example, it builds on Hebbian learning, and it's saying that when you have patterns matching, that you have the opportunity to learn quickly, and on the other hand, error-based learning clearly is important too. And we know from engineering that we need derivatives, we need things like gradient descent. So this error-based learning that happens in backpropagation and Adeline, the work that Widrow and Werboth pioneered, and that builds its way into reinforcement learning, cost functions, mapping these problems together. The error-based learning and the match-based learning are still usually used as modes of learning, and there's very little that I've seen. I've worked on it some, but very little that I've seen where people have brought these together to where they autonomously switch back and forth between those modes of learning like animals do. Well, now, one thing you will not hear me predict for the future, I do not agree with the prognosticators that say by 2030 computers will be smarter than humans. I think that sets my BS detector flying off the scale. And so what you will see between now and 2030 is more and more successful applications that are now very expensive to do and including labor intensive to do that maybe only humans do. You'll see more and more of those knocked off by computational intelligence. But people get very confused and they don't, and so people understand when you have something like a champion chess player and you go, okay, that can beat humans, but it is not human intelligence. But we still have not mastered dragonfly intelligence. So there's a lot of things that insects and animals do that we have not yet mastered. And so it's far too early to be talking about human level capabilities. I'm not one to say never. But if you want to see it in your lifetime, I recommend to do research on having a longer lifetime.
So you don't predict Skynet in the near future?
Right.
Okay. All right, so Don, do you have any final thoughts, advice to the young folks?
Sure. What this implies is that this is an incredibly exciting time to be working in the field. And so all three of us work in clustering, and I think that's particularly hot because society's generating data faster than even computers can keep up. So when I was a grad student, people would say faster than humans can keep up, so you need a computer. But now, for example, in bioinformatics, the rate at which we're accumulating data is increasing faster than Moore's law. So we have a need for improvements in algorithms. We're not just going to meet it with hardware. And this need is going to persist for the foreseeable future. So people have the potential for a very long and profitable career in this field, even if we succeed in having much longer lifetimes. So I hope to live to well over 100, and I think that the young generation of students may be working for 70 or 80 more years, productive years, with improvements in technology and health technology. And I think that we are looking forward to another great century of work in this field, and there's plenty of opportunities. So I would tell young people that it's just an incredibly exciting time to be working in this field. We still have a lot of the pioneers around, but you also have some opportunities that we never dreamed of.
Okay, that's an excellent interview. And so, to carry on the standard tradition of these interviews, what's the last thing you do when you're being video recorded? What do you say to the audience? What do you say?
Thank you.
Well, you say, Okay. I'm
Give him
gonna
a
do
hint.
first.
You do it.
Okay. You say,
Hi, Mom.
Oh, hi, Mom.
There you go.
And Dad.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, Don. Excellent
sir.
interview.
This interview recorded live at Brisbane Filmland Studios, sound by Dodo Sound,
Wiki 20.
June 13th, 2012.